Good morning, friends, and welcome to worship at New Garden Friends meeting. We're so glad you're here. This is a time we set aside each week to listen together, and we do that through music and prayer and a message, and then through our open worship. And as friends, we believe that God can speak to or through anyone, so we ask you all to listen together. You are welcome here if this is your first time at a Quaker meeting or if you have been coming to Quaker meeting your entire life. Everyone is welcome here. Our reading this morning is Jeremiah 29, 1, 4 through 7. These are the words of the letter that the prophet Jeremiah sent from Jerusalem to the remaining elders among the exiles, and to the priests, the prophets, and all the people whom Nebuchadnezzar had sent into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. Thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, to all the exiles whom I have sent into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon: build houses and live in them, plant gardens and eat what they produce. Take wives and have sons and daughters. Take wives for your sons and give your daughters in marriage, that they may bear sons and daughters. Multiply there and do not decrease. But seek the welfare of the city where I have sent you into exile, and pray to the Lord on its behalf, for in its welfare you will find your welfare. Good morning again, friends. It's good to see you all. And I have spent the last week thinking about the worship that we had last Sunday. Maybe some of you have too. For those who weren't able to join us, we had a lovely worship of thanks and blessing for our former pastor, Margaret Webb. I loved hearing all of your stories about Margaret and the time that she was here, and getting the opportunity to thank her and to bless her as she goes forth. So thank you all for that. And we're going forth as well. We're going ahead. I wanted to just let you know that I will not be here the next 2 Sundays. I am going to be traveling. Next weekend, I will be in New York at a congregational church, bringing the message there, and the following Sunday, I will be at Jamestown Friends meeting nearby. But I will be here during the week. I'm not completely gone. So if you need pastoral care or just want to visit, let me know. And I know that you will be in good hands on Sunday mornings when I'm not here. So the scripture we read today in Jeremiah is about a community responding to trauma. And I once heard someone describe trauma as an event where nothing is the same afterwards. There's the before and there's the after, and nothing is the same. And I think it's important for us to have a definition of trauma because we've all experienced it over the past few years. The world has changed and we are not the same, as much as we might want things to be the same. And for many of us, we have experienced complex trauma. We have had the trauma of the pandemic, the loss of normalcy, and we've experienced loss of loved ones or loss of a job, all sorts of losses at the same time. And so we've had these multiple traumatic events that we are continuing to grieve, and we have not been able to gather and grieve in the ways that we find comforting. And so this may lead us to ask, where is God in all of this? This cry of the people after they have experienced a great loss. And that is where we find these people in Jeremiah. They have experienced this incredible trauma of the exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. And after this exile, the Jewish people had a crisis of faith. They asked, where is God when so many people were taken into exile? This letter from Jeremiah shows the shattered identity of this community. And it's unusual to have a letter in the Old Testament. We see those much more often in the New Testament. This letter shows that the community is divided into two. There are the people who were taken into exile and those who were left behind, who remain with Jeremiah in Jerusalem. And the opening verse lists the people who were taken into exile: elders, priests, prophets, and all the people whom Nebuchadnezzar had taken from Jerusalem to Babylon. So really important leaders, the strength of this community. And Jeremiah is one of the few remaining. He tries to bridge this gap with a pastoral letter. And the way that Jeremiah describes God shows the depth of this crisis. He writes on behalf of God, repeating the names of God, the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel. He reminds the people that God is still the God of Israel. And God takes responsibility for sending the people into exile. The exiles whom I have sent into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. And it may be disturbing to think about a God who would send people into exile. It's a little disturbing for me. But for the people of Judah, this is probably more comforting than an absent God, or a God who is weaker than the gods of Babylon. For them, at least, this is a God who is in control. And I don't find much comfort in this idea of God, this God who is controlling everything and punishing people, though I can understand why some people find that comforting. I am much more comforted by a God who is with us in hard times. I don't believe that God sends trials or does things to punish us, but I do believe that God is with us, walking alongside us as we grieve and as we struggle. There's another divide between these people. There are the people who want to rise up against their captors, and the people who don't, who want to lay low, stay safe. And it's understandable that these people would want to fight back against these people who've taken everything from them. But Jeremiah gives them a different message. He says, build houses and live in them, plant gardens and eat what they produce. Jeremiah is telling the people to settle in. They are going to be in exile for a long time. And what comes next emphasizes just how long this is going to be. Long enough to marry and to have children, and for those children to marry as well. And there's a verse later in this chapter that's often taken out of context. It's Jeremiah 29:11, which says, I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. And I've heard a lot of people use this verse to say, God has a plan and God has a plan for you. But this chapter is a reminder that our plans are not God's plans. These people in exile, these Jewish people, probably hoped that God's plan was to take them home very soon, and that was not the plan. They will stay in exile for 70 years, longer than a lifetime at this time. And so this hope for the future is for those who will come afterwards, the children who will marry and continue on. And since I've been here with you at New Garden Friends meeting, I've heard a lot of people say that they wish things could get back to normal. You have told me about your traditions, about how you always do things at Christmas, the groups that used to meet, the children who were here. And I understand, I love hearing these stories. You love this community and you want to see it thriving. You want to see it back to the way you remember it. But there is no going back. Things have changed and we can't go back to the way things used to be. And fortunately, that's not bad news. As friends, we believe in continuing revelation, that God is always speaking to us if we take the time to listen. And God is calling us in new ways. Like the exiles in this passage, we're being called to settle in, to be where we are, to see where we are. God is asking us to build and to plant, to think of a future for those who will come after us. And God will be with us, walking every step of the way. And so as we settle into this time of open worship, I invite you to consider the question, what are you feeling called to build and to plant? What dreams do you have for this community of friends? How do you see God at work now in New Garden Friends meeting? And if you feel led to share these hopes and dreams with the rest of us, please speak. We will listen.